We're late.
Yeah, where it's taking minutes to actually do. I pressed the button a long time ago. Here we go. I think this is right.
We're on.
We're on?
Yes. Hi, everybody.
Hello, hello, hello.
Hello. Do we have people there? Let's wait to see who comes and joins in the party. Let's see who joins in the party. Hi, John Malik. John Malik is here.
Let's see.
Hi, everybody. Hi, John Malik. Darrell, volume.
I just turned it down.
Thank you, Don.
Hi, Uncle Jeff. John Malik Torias here.
Welcome on in, everybody.
More people here. I just can't see them all.
Yeah, I got it.
You can see them. Crystal Joy.
I guess we should just jump right in since we're here. Let's go.
Absolutely.
Yeah, let's start. Hi, welcome everybody that's come to the first edition of Beyond the Thread Conversations in Context. This is an idea I had a while back about having conversations that go beyond the threads that we're all reading. We're all reading threads, and social media has done an excellent job of bringing people together, allowing us to have deeper conversations and connections across the world. It's been instrumental in creating uprisings, creating community, creating better cooks, and all kinds of things on the internet. But I think where it may have fallen short is getting to the depth behind why we say what it is we say. You know, sometimes we come hot to a thread and we're coming from our algorithm. We're coming from our life. We're coming from our information, all of our context, and we bring all that heat and all that weight to just a blurb, just a headline. And I was finding that a lot was being lost in translation. I would see people that I dearly love and care about disagree vehemently online because they didn't know information about each other that I understood. So I wanted to create a space where we could go beyond the thread, beyond the headlines, beyond the click tick-tack of 140 characters or less, and then beyond just a Facebook interaction, to get back to deeper communications and talking about how and what we are and why we are. So it's Beyond the Thread, Conversations in Context. And here we are. This is the first time we're doing this, so bear with us if we have technical difficulties. But here we are. I am Brian Harlan Brooks. Jamal Story is here, and Darrell J. Hunt. All of us are in the entertainment business. We all are singers, actors, dancers. We've done a lot of things, but tonight is really about us communicating as human beings and talking further than what it is that we do and what it is that we come from, but going deeper to who we actually are. So I'll just kick off the conversation. The first topic that we want to discuss is, where are we, right? I have survived an epidemic. I'm old enough to have come through the HIV epidemic. Everybody on here is, thank you very much. I am old enough to have survived a president that I thought was racist or difficult or problematic. I'm old enough to have survived civil unrest. I am older than the Rodney King riots. I was working very much when the Rodney King riots happened. And these are things that have been happening since before I was born. So what is the same and what is the difference about where we are now? Darrell, you want to start with that?
As I've experienced it, where we are now is we're at a place where we don't understand specifically what we should, maybe can do. Many of us don't know exactly where to spend our energy. And those of us who have some idea because of past experiences, different levels of education, different levels of cultural exposure, we sometimes have a window into what we feel like we can do. And a lot of times we try to share that information, and that can be difficult because of the lack of ability to contextualize things with keystrokes. That's why I think something like Beyond the Thread is particularly important. So we're at a place where we have the energy to do, we have the zeal. Now we're at a place where we need to figure out logistics, knowledge-wise, all of that. We need to figure out the how from day to day.
Yeah, and Jamal, you want to add anything?
Yeah, we everything that you guys have said is resonant with me for all of the same reasons. And then also right now we're in a time when people are so outraged and so devastated and so shocked. There's a certain level of shock by what's happened. And the conversation is one where all of us who have seen this, as you mentioned, Rodney King, since then and before, are having to recalibrate how we effectively deal with that shock from people who genuinely don't get that this has been persistent. You know, the things that are going on right now are all extensions of the same thing, and that same thing has existed for so very, very, very long. And those of us who understand the reasons are addressing the conversation sometimes the same, but often differently to sort of account for the variation in how people are, you know, so it's all of that and then some.
Yeah, and I think we'd be remiss if we didn't mention the names Ahmaud Arbery, Breonna Taylor, and George Floyd that have precipitated this moment that we're in. When we see four officers to be clear, take a man and have one and hold him down and press the life out of him for almost 9 minutes, it is unbearable to watch. And although we can all say that we're old hat, those of us here, this is never without the sting, the stain, and the pain of it. It took me a week to actually watch the video. And I didn't watch it all the way through. I still have not, because
I've never seen it.
You've never seen it. I understand. Jamal, have you seen it?
I can only watch it in pieces. I could not watch all 9 minutes in succession.
Absolutely. And the pain of that immediately hits us. So I think what we immediately did was have an emotional reaction, and I think everybody did. And then when we saw that the officers were not being detained, arrested, spoken to, there was nothing that was really, there became a protest. And then it became clear to everyone that with Mr. Floyd specifically, there was going to be no arrest. It went further. But before that, we had Ahmaud Arbery, who's running, and two gentlemen, much like George Zimmerman, I use that term gentleman loosely, but two men, much like with George Zimmerman, decided to take it upon themselves, and these men were not even neighborhood watch, to corner, chase, and shoot someone. And Breonna Taylor, who was laying in her own home, in her own bed in the middle of the night, was shot multiple times in her own bed. And she's an EMT, she's a first-line responder. And then you want to put under that the cauldron of COVID-19 that we were already existing in, that we were already struggling with. A pandemic is something that comes along once in a generation of 100 years. So to have a pandemic unleashed on us, and then to have the news weeks before be that it disproportionately affected Black and Brown people. Now, all of us on here can tell you that we knew that was going to happen because we are disproportionately affected by anything negative in our society. Anything happening in our society that is negative is going to disproportionately affect Black people. And when I heard it's going to affect people with underlying conditions and poor health care, I knew we were already targeted. Black and Brown people, specifically in this moment, Black people are suffering under those conditions daily for a myriad of social economic reasons. So when that came to the fore and they broke that demographic down, and immediately it seemed within the weekend, people were out protesting to get out. The degree of stress that I was under at the point where I saw Ahmaud Arbery and heard about Breonna Taylor and saw George Floyd, it was unbearable. So I knew from my own history and from reading that this was going to go down and that we were about to go in the streets. And then I saw it build, and I saw it build more. Now, I had seen this before with Rodney King, and we had just seen it, even everybody here in this generation, just seen it with Ferguson. But what I noticed immediately was the force at which this came forward. The level of outrage and the evidently multicultural idea, because every march, to be clear, has been multicultural and multi-ethnic.
Yeah.
But this one was visibly so to TV cameras, which was the first time that I saw something different about this moment. Tell me what you saw different about this moment than moments you'd seen in the past.
For me, the thing that was different was the fact that the response was not just the Black community. As I have studied year in and year out, as I'm now at 40, it's normally the bulk of us. We get excited, we march, but even as I was marching today in honor of for Mr. Floyd's memorial, I looked around and it was really an even count of white citizens, Latino citizens. I mean, it was great representation. As we marched, there was police escort. People, as we marched, we went by Mount Sinai Hospital. Workers were coming out and waving and supporting. As we were going by Central Park, people were waving and people were actually stopping, and they were trying to figure out what was going on. But for me, what stood out the most about this uprising was the fact that a lot of white people are actually, well, more than normal. That's how I'll quantify that. More than normal numbers of white people have actually been responding to this. And I think it is because of the administration that we've sat under. A lot of white Americans who were able to ignore things that didn't exist to them, I think Trump has threatened their normal level of privilege. Like, oh, I used to be exempt. Oh, that happened to those people. Oh, that didn't affect me. Oh, I have health insurance. So as this administration has been going on, people have become more and more fed up. And then as we look at COVID and people, as you said, being crammed in the house, not really having the freedom to do anything. And going back to what you said, when we saw people, when they announced that Black and brown people would be disproportionately suffering under COVID-19, I thought about how amazing that is, because the greatest cell line in American medical history belongs to Henrietta Lacks. The most significant medical research that has been done in America and abroad belongs to the cells of this woman who in the 50s was being seen at Johns Hopkins Hospital. And they took her cells, they were called HeLa cells, because at that time, as long as they didn't use your full name, they didn't have to pay you any money on the dividends or the money that they made from your research. So that was my first thing about COVID and how that was such a surprise, but not really. But I think what surprised me about this was the number of white Americans, the number of Latino Americans who have decided to push all of their differences aside to say, now this is the last straw. So that's what I've noticed that's different about this particular uprising.
Yeah, it's that you mentioned the administration, our current administration, the war that Trump has waged against media is met by the media. There's a persistence of loggerheads there, and so what it does too is it gives the media this sort of push and to show us the things that we ordinarily wouldn't get to see in a situation like this. So yeah. we're seeing, as you said, as Brian mentioned earlier, there were white people involved in other civil rights protests of different sorts over the ages. We've seen them in bigger numbers this time, but we've also seen the nuances involved of that and how that's played out. We've seen, and we've also heard, because of social media, oh, now there are people who are coming from the other side, coming from these really, really dark and nefarious places to sort of sabotage everything. They're coming to, sort of set fire to something and then run so that all of the Black people in the nearby area who were protesting peacefully can, deal with that. So there's some malevolence that we're also seeing that is actually coming out, that's being discussed, that probably existed in every single one of these over the whiles, but we're seeing it now. And those dynamics, the White House dynamic with the media, the White House dynamic with, as you said, people who are absolutely at the top of their ability to sort of deal or handle or accept or cope with the administration. All of that is sort of participating in how we are getting to see this particular part of the revolution be televised.
Yes.
Also, I think somebody asked this. They said, do we think people are being shamed into participating, or are people participating from a genuine wanting to start a crucial conversation? And my answer to that is that I think that shame does play a part in the evolution for everyone, right? Because people were crying and sobbing, and many of us were crying and sobbing because we knew we were going to end up exactly right here. I didn't know we were in a pandemic. I didn't know, but I knew someone was going to get shot. I knew there was going to be a televised shooting of a Black person because Ferguson was just a few minutes ago. Yeah. And all those uprisings around Freddie Gray and all those other people were was coming, and it happens with a regularity. And just to be clear for everybody who's watching or listening and doesn't know, this is happening all the time since the beginning of the American experiment with impunity. Sometimes it was state sanctioned, and sometimes it's corruptly state sanctioned, and sometimes there's pretense to following up on laws. But for the most part, Black people have been being killed by law enforcement with impunity since the beginning of the idea of the United States. So for my education, for my life, this is never something that has ever been far away. And as the three of us that are Black men here, we all can tell you our experiences, but what I think is more valuable than us necessarily carting out our personal experiences that will inevitably tug at heartstrings, which is important. I want to just stay with the mind for a second and say, this has been going on. And as seeing people in shock, you know, I think I was speaking to a group of people the other day, and I said, if you're worried about your Black coworkers and friends, kind of give you one of these eyes, the side eye. Give the side eye, because you're going, people are saying, I want education, I really want to be there, I really want to help you. And I believe that that's true. However, we are saying, our sentiment is, where you been? Where have you been? Because we have been screaming this. I mean, as I said, and I'll let one of you take the next part, but as I said, Martin Luther King's birthday is a whole holiday. Black History Month is a whole month. Kwanzaa exists. This is a conversation. People are saying white supremacy and patriarchy on TV regularly every day. If you don't know what's happening, it's because it didn't affect you enough for you to really take heed, or for some, unfortunately, it was a lack of belief of what we were telling you.
And with that, I'm going to bring another book.
Come on, Darrell.
Yes, books.
Post-Traumatic Slave Syndrome, Dr. Joy Degree. One of the most significant.
Dr. Joy Degree is so major.
She is amazing.
If anybody doesn't know, get with it.
The reason I love her is her current work today is rooted in how she felt as a child. She wondered why we were so angry, why our neighborhoods looked like they did, why there was such a lack of peace of mind and overall like a family feel in our community. So she went and got all the degrees. I think she has a doctor, 2 masters in there, her undergrad. One of the most specific sections of this book that deals with non-Black citizens not knowing information is a section where she talks about the sanitizing of American history. She said, she said the sanitizing of American history. She said, we know everybody else's dirt. We know what they did to Italy. We know what was done in China to the people. We know what was with the Holocaust. We know everybody else's information. But when it comes time to developing the curriculum from kindergarten to 12th grade on into college, all of a sudden everything, it gets washed out. We don't really talk about what happened to the Native Americans. We don't really talk about what happened to Black people. We don't really talk about what happened to Asian Americans and stuff like that. Sanitizing American history. And that is how we get people, I believe really that's how we get people who are bachelor's, master's degree, or hardworking individual, not much education or whatever beyond high school, people at different levels. That's how we get people who are like, oh my gosh, that really happened? Because nobody at any time throughout their life put it in their ear. The curriculum specialist didn't set it for them in elementary, middle, or high school. The college that they went to didn't give it to them. And specifically those of us, African Americans, if you are for the majority in the PWI, coming from the conversation that I've had with Black Americans, predominantly white institution.
Thank you.
If you are in those, you're not really learning much about you. Your curriculum requirement as far as the world histories will be pretty much Eurocentric and then whitewashed as when it comes to America. So that's the curriculum requirement. The elective is AA studies, Asian American studies. You don't need any of these to meet your requirement, your credits to graduate. So I wholeheartedly believe it is the design of American education systems that allows people to be 40 or 50 years old and they're like, oh my gosh, Black men are being murdered in the streets.
Well, and the partitioning of history too, that in the context of education, you know, even the idea of Black history, American history is Black history because we built it. That's the whole thing. So the sort of extricating Black people from the general history of America and then teaching it separately, or having an African American studies course that is specifically about that history, all of that does a disservice to everyone, not just the Black people who then have to learn all of this stuff as extracurricular information during Black History Month, which is, I've always had a problem with that. We're Black all year, so let's deal with history, our history all year. But the white people have to deal with our history too. It cannot just be about what we know about how all of this went down. It has to be about the integration of the truth of everybody who came over here, how we all got over here. It has to include us. It has to even include the things that are ugly that have nothing to do with us. White women who were brought over here during Jamestown in the 17th century, they were brought over here and they didn't all make it. They didn't all make it over here. Some died. I think in one transatlantic trip, 19 of them died and there were 4 here. But all with the idea of breeding, all with the idea of sort of great genetics, all with that whole eugenics movement that came later. It was all based in the same idea. And I think that, to Brian's earlier point, part of it has to do with incorporating the concept that systemic racism exists and that it has always been here and that the country was built on it. That's the beginning, and that we have to center a profound fear and dislike of Black people in that conversation about systemic racism. That has to be the beginning, and that's where we start to get rid of all the shock.
And to that point, and to both of your points, and we're going to move on to the next part of it, but both of your points, when Blackness and the history of Blackness becomes an elective, that mentally tells you something about how important it is. When you can say, I elect to take African American studies, I'll select Asian American studies. When we don't include America as a whole tale, it leaves us out. And then when you look at Michelle Obama, and there was all that outrage when she said, this is the first time I think I'm fully proud of the United States. It's because there's context to what she's talking about. She's saying that no one has to know our history. I know a whole lot about the Holocaust, the European Holocaust. I know a whole lot about it because it was part of our European history that was in our regular history class. And we were talking proud about it. I'm proud to, it's important to know. But to take what happened to me and how this country was built as a selective or elective doesn't allow a full understanding of the country. So when somebody says what Michelle Obama says, people are outraged and confused by it, because they're only learning as the a la carte as they feel needed to, which brings me into the next part of our conversation. And I want to slide right down into hardcore Black Lives Matter and how Black Lives Matter has become a controversial statement, which should not be. There is nothing controversial about saying Black Lives Matter. There are 1,000 analogies. I'll give one. We don't say Broadway cares, equity fights AIDS, and other diseases too. We don't say Broadway cares, equity fights all diseases. We don't say, we name those diseases. We don't do the cancer fund and the cancer walk and the breast cancer walk. We don't talk about the breast cancer walk and say, well, what about the melanoma walk? We don't do that. But only start talking about Black lives do we have this anti-Blackness at the root of it. And I just want to talk a little bit about why dealing with anti-Blackness will be the core of us healing through this moment. You want to go with that, Jamal? Why don't you start? Anti-Blackness, and where is that taking?
Anti-Blackness, for me, the entire thing is certainly about the lack of comfort. That's the beginning of it. Anytime you have a conversation and you notice that you have a conversation with someone about Blackness and you notice that there's a lack of comfort, that people get squeamish and about that. That's when you know, okay, so this is where we have a deficit of understanding. This is where we're gonna have a really, really, really rough time dealing with Black and what that is. For me, the biggest challenge is is understanding, is helping people to understand where the fear is coming from. Is it skin color? Is it darkness? Is it how far removed is it power? Is it intimidation? Or is there a general level of intimidation of Blackness in all of its sort of shapes? And I don't mean physical shapes, I mean cultural references. I mean sort of deeply internalized physical sensibilities. All of that stuff that is sort of what we, oftentimes Black people put under the guise of Black culture, or all of those things become scary. And in my experience, they become scary, and they make people go, ooh, ooh. I was just watching this report on Oprah, and I don't know how this came up on my feed, but it was Oprah back in '87 when she went to Forsyth, Georgia, to actually enter. She's 5 months into the Oprah Winfrey Show, and she went to Forsyth to talk to people who all they wanted was a completely homogenized white county, and they did not want Black people there, and they were unapologetic about it, and they were loud. And he said, you know what, I'm taking my crew and everybody, and we're going down here and we're going to talk to these people. And it was really interesting because they had such conviction about not wanting Black people there. And then there was this distinction because, Oprah, and I love that the microphone at this point, you take the microphone and you do this. Tell me why. And one guy said, he says, I make a distinction between Black people and niggas.
Yeah.
For him, niggas are the people, who destroyed the area in Atlanta where I grew up, who sort of, turned that area into a really, really low class, cluttered, littered, desolate, poverty-stricken, not desolate, but poverty-stricken area. And I am devastated about that. And those are niggas. But I talk to Black people. Black people are just fine. And he's looking at Oprah. That kind of thing, that kind of intimidation, fear, confusion about Blackness is the part that I think is where we start with anti-Blackness. With what is your problem? That's basically what is your issue? What is your problem? I think that's the beginning of it.
And Jamal, sorry, Darrell. Jamal, can you tell me what it's like for you? You danced with a couple of huge celebrities, gigantic, some of the biggest in the world. And what is it? Tell me about you as a lighter skinned Black man. What has your experience been regarding your Blackness? And tell us a little bit about where you are in that.
Well, yeah, I have danced for a few celebrities. Madonna and Cher are probably the biggest in terms of name. And what's been really interesting to me about that is processing lightness in the context of that. I know one of the things that we accept immediately in the industry is that, okay, well, there are only 8 dancers, there are only 10 dancers. There's only gonna be one Black boy. There's only gonna be one Black girl, maybe. There's only going to be one, right? We only need one to qualify it as diverse, right? We only need one. And so what happens is, all of those things about colorism and the paper bag test, they all come into view. So for me, I don't count in that moment as a Black person. My colleague, who is Your Color Brian or Your Color Darrell, that person now becomes the avatar for Black people for this particular tour in this stage experience that we're watching. Whereas I kind of fade off into other. So this is how there can be 2 Black men on a tour, and even when that casting isn't sort of deliberate, even when it's not like in the front, that's still the general thing we understand. That's we just know that's what it is, and you sort of accept all of these sort of unfortunate things about the industry that you're in. One of the issues that I've had is in dealing with, in one situation with one artist, there were 3 people who were let go for various reasons, and they sued her for reasons that had nothing to do with sort of a collective, but they sued her. And one of the things that emerged in the lawsuit was this idea that Cher is racist, and she's racist. And I went, well, that's odd because there's so many Black people still left on her stage. I'm one of them, and I'm the dance captain. So I'm not just a dancer, I'm actually in a position of authority. There's another one over here standing to my left. there are singers. There are two singers, and they're both Black. And there's a keyboardist on this side of stage. So how is it that suddenly she becomes racist? And of course, what happened is it became about sort of the visualization that what we're looking at is the dancers on the stage, and what was said is, oh well, you know, Jamal doesn't count. He doesn't look Black. And so
that experience has to be, and when we go with anti-Blackness and proximity to whiteness and all those ideas, when we deal with anti-Blackness and we say Black Lives Matter, it's really important that we don't do the same thing that has done to us in terms of white supremacy and saying we have to now say Black Lives Matter. Now you have to say light-skinned Black Lives Matter. And then we have to say gay Black Lives Matter. And we have to continue that thing. Instead of Black Lives Matter is a final and finished statement. It needs no interpretation. Yeah. And to understand that from my perspective, Blackness has always been a term of inclusion. Go ahead, Darrell.
And anti-Blackness is the end product of systemic racism. So all of this is the product of the system that makes sure that white folk, specifically the white people in power, because there is a difference. This book,
come on,
White Trash, talks about the fact that we are not in a class-free nation. Paul Mooney used to say, now the white folks, with the ones that y'all ain't got no money, y'all ain't even white folks because y'all ain't making decisions. But what we're looking at is, yes, what we're looking at is the end result or the continuing result of systemic racism. Again, if you cannot define a system, I've been having this conversation for weeks. If you cannot define a system, if you can't just give us one example of a system, for example, a car, that's a system. A lot of moving parts fitly joined together for one job. So if we want to go back to establishing anti-Blackness, there's a certain amount of fear that has to be set in the minds of the people. And one of the greatest tools to instill that fear was D.W. Griffith's The Birth of a Nation. That was 1929. That's when the Klan had its resurgence. There were 3 moments of resurgence with the Klan.
And to be clear, Birth of a Nation is a film, everyone that's watching that hasn't heard of it. It was a film. And this piece of art galvanized the Klan. Continue.
And it's D.W. Griffith's The Birth of a Nation, not the movie that came out some years ago. And what happened was the Black man was established as subhuman, the monster, and he was also established as wanting a white woman at all times. She was the prize and the goal. And if we look at Emmett Till's story and we listen to the interview where the 2 men that killed him later earned either $3,000 or $4,000 selling their story, saying that they had done it, but because of double jeopardy, once you've been found not guilty in a court of law, you cannot be tried again. They said when he was not ashamed or afraid of saying that he went to school with white girls, they told the reporter, that is what did it. And that is what we have to protect. So fear has been instilled in them at every moment, at every second. That's why when integration came about, one Black child went to the school, everybody, all the white people pulled their children out. So again, anti-Blackness is basically the end product of systemic racism. At no time are you allowed to accept Blackness. At no time are you allowed to celebrate Blackness. And the most specific experience I had with anti-Blackness was the moment that I was just celebrating us with t-shirts and a phrase that said, you can't outdo Black people. I caught hell on Twitter, on Instagram, on Facebook, all the platforms. And when I wore the t-shirt around town and when other people wore the t-shirt, people literally were like, and sometimes I would sit on the train and I would forget that I had the t-shirt on because I wasn't hypervigilant with it. It's a fact to me and the rest of American culture. So it's really what systemic racism does. Anti-Blackness, the discrepancies with loans and banking, not allowing people into schools and spaces. I mean, all of that, it's just a product of systemic racism. And if you once you understand what a system is, you will understand why anti-Blackness still exists.
And if we go back to, Jamal coined the phrase the other day when we were talking, it was I'm better than youism. The whole entire experiment is rooted in a monarchy. So the idea that there has to be somebody better than someone else is the root of the country. So when we go back and we look, there were white indentured servants and there were indigenous slaves and there were African slaves. That wasn't going to be a sustainable model for systemic oppression of anyone, because that creates a multicultural working individual who can come together and overthrow and now have as much power. They have the tool became anti-blackness, because that is the most telling tool. You cannot hide it, you can't change it. It happens every time. You can see it with a 10 miles away, 10 blocks away, or right there. And that becomes the easiest group of people to control and then to convince other people you're better than. And while not giving those other people anything, because the message really is that anti-blackness is dangerous for everyone. White supremacy is bad for white people. That is the message we need to get out into the world, because white supremacy means you will never be white enough, because it's going back to a monarchical system. So if all of the, that's in white supremacy.
Point, back to this book. Right. That's because it didn't work when they did that. They tried to be just the white people before they brought us over here, and it didn't work. It was better than youism over here. It was here the people who have land, and they're the wealthy people. And if you don't have land, then you're a cracker. We didn't come up with that. That was already in place. I mean, there's a cracker dictionary and everything. I'm just saying.
Disparage white people. The terms that disparage white people, as you say all the time, Jamal, are created by other white people, not by Black people. And to be clear, cracker and those terms are about whip cracking, even Karen and the terms that everybody seems to be in the uproar today, always are about their superiority. They're actually disparaging comments about them overall. It's not a them versus them. It's a specific behavior attributed to a group of people, and Black people didn't come up with the majority of those terms.
And recognizing that, I will say, I will speak from my experience. I was never raised to desire or want to be around white America. I was not raised that way. In Greensboro, North Carolina, all of the businesses that we needed were Black owned. Integration came around, and the business society decided that we're going to do everything that we can to shut a lot of those Black businesses down, to get the Black dollar back into their pockets, into their wallets. The title of the book is escaping me, but it's sold at the museum in Greensboro where I used to work. And they listed the names of the businesses and how and why they were shut down, i.e., the new building code required that your sign needed to be X amount of feet above your door. Your store had to be X amount of feet from the street. So are we going to widen this up? So I, in highlighting what you're saying, the class system of whiteness was not designed by Black folk. We specifically, historically, have wanted to be left to our own ability and desire. We have not, my grandmother and the people that raised me, they did not want to be around them. They said, we don't want to be at Woolworth. We cook better than they do anyway. We just want the right to go if we wanted to. And I think a lot of people in our communities, in Black communities, are thrown off because they feel like the desire up to now has been to be around them and carry on. But I feel like the song in Ain't Misbehaving, we're so proud to relax at the Waldorf, where folks sit around all day. It was boring. It was a hack. They wanted to be back uptown singing The Joint Is Jumping. So I just wanted to highlight, historically, we have not wanted to be around them.
Well, there's the assumption that all of us wholesale buy into the American dream. You know, it's the reason that I love August Wilson's plays so much, because that whole 10-play cycle is about the fallacy of the American dream as it pertains to people, right? But what I find is, and going back to Brian's earlier statements about colorism, and in my experience with colorism, one of the things that's interesting is you go to get an education in a PWI, and it's the Ivy League of the South, and then you matriculate through your 4 years, and at every step you are reminded that you are a Black person.
Yes.
Regardless of your skin color. It's like, oh, well, we feel more comfortable because of the white adjacents and because of the proximity, and because now we have ascribed certain kinds of comfort levels to who we think you are based on how articulate you are. I mean, that still happens in every white environment.
politics.
There's that.
And, I think we have a couple of questions and a couple of things I want to address in this moment. We want to talk about the people of color versus Blackness, right?
Mm-hmm.
And people of color who identify with whiteness, and how in this moment where we are, that people of color and Blackness has become synonymous. But there needs to be conversations within our society, because under the guise of white supremacy, everybody is struggling for their own survival. So it makes sense to me that if I am not Black, that I would hold on to the parts of me that was not Black as much as possible.
Mm-hmm.
And then, because of propaganda and white supremacy and the agenda behind that is systematic and structural, I would, if I come here and I happen to be purple, but they're Black, I would be like, well, I'm purple. And although Blackness has always been a term of inclusion, the idea that I can further myself, distance myself from the idea of Blackness is what happens. And many people
encouraged to.
And they're encouraged to do so. See, and so it's not, if you come here from Puerto Rico and you have curly hair and lighter skin, and you understand that you may have African heritage somewhere in there, and you have the music there, but you want to have a more successful life in an American construct, it's pushing you towards anti-Blackness. So that's what we get a lot of the time. Quite a few of our brothers and sisters from other cultures that share the same diasporic genetic makeup as we all share, and have similar coloring, come from islands or come from places where we have darker and lighter people, and everybody's of color. When they get to the United States, the line is so clear that the go-to to be a person of color who is not Black comes in. And I just want to go here, then until we get to this moment where we're in right here. And there is no more hiding. There is no more, until Puerto Rico is attacked by a hurricane and white supremacy shows Puerto Rico how much you cannot be, we're going to treat you as if you were an all Black island. We're going to take away your needs, not give things that you need. Go ahead, Darrell.
Very quickly, what I wanted to say about that, and people in those areas who don't want to identify with their African roots from a place of celebration, like Celia Cruz did. She said, I am Afro-Cuban. She said, where do you think this rhythm comes from? Where do you think this sound comes from? She said, it's a blending. When Henry Louis Gates did that 4-part series, Blacks in Latin America, that basically killed any denial that they would like to have, because he took it from Europe to the slave trade. He took it way to, and it was the different areas of Latin America. So that, again, particularly killed all of that, oh no, I'm not this, I'm not that. But as I saw when I moved to New York and started going to the gym, those allegedly non-Black Latin people, when they started sweating on the treadmill, their edges looked about the same as mine. So it showed up in present day, because when I got to sweating and this side rolled up, their side was just as rolled up as mine. So that's all come back. That's all I had to say about that. Thank you, Louis Gates.
Our caste system is everywhere that there was colonization. So,
Where, to just tell a brief story, when my mother worked she was a chemical technologist, and she worked with a woman that was from India, and the Indian woman used to go running every morning. And one day she said to my mother, oh, I can't go running, and I'm gaining weight. And my mother was like, well, why can't you go running? She was like, I have a wedding to go to. And my mother was like, okay. And she was like, oh, my mother and my mother-in-law would be furious if I got darker before the wedding. And my mother closed her office door and sat her down and gave her an education about.
Yes. I'm sure Lois did.
Yeah.
Because the reality of the situation is, at this point where we're yelling Black Lives Matter, what I want everybody to come away from this understanding is that yelling Black Lives Matter is a battle cry for all lives, absolutely. But we have to start at where it starts. And anti-Blackness, and Indigenous people too, but anti-Blackness is where we're starting the conversation. Anti-Blackness is the system and structure that's in place. Not the worst thing you could have been in the antebellum South was a nigger lover. That's almost worse than being a nigger yourself. So that aspect of it, and then people that could pass, and people that could be other, they got more of the pie, the lighter skinned Black, but that did not take away the fact that at the end of that, they were Black. So just because somebody was in the house, that didn't make them not a slave. That made them subject to other whims of massa.
Right.
And that was not, and so oftentimes darker skinned Black people get it harder publicly, but in all of it, all of the Black lives have increments of that pain. But we do see the fear of the big black buck, and we do see the fear and the stereotypes of all of that that comes from minstrelsy in this country moving us. I want to move the conversation forward to my favorite part of the conversation, which is what I call COVID-19, the revealer.
Yes.
In all the things that we've discussed tonight, you know, there's been a lot of education, a lot of thought, but really COVID-19 has made it impossible for even Black people who would rather not, Black people who consider themselves conservative Republicans fiscally, Black people who consider themselves not wanting to do just Black things. And so the Trump administration and the COVID-19 has revealed that that is an impossibility. That the only way to get to the next part is to go through where we've come from. That you cannot force yourself, you cannot let it go because it's right here all the time. It's like not getting an HIV test. Whether you get an HIV test or not, your status will be whatever your status is. Whether you get a test or not. So whether we want to face what anti-Blackness is as a country, whether we want to face what othering does, whether we want to face what better than youism does to everyone as a culture, it is still there. And what COVID-19 has made happen is it's impossible to ignore because you're now in the house. You're now, and every moment has revealed another moment. And then with the Trump administration running like a fire underneath COVID-19, which is the pot that we're all in, it was inevitable that we were going to hit this point. It was inevitable. And when we hit this point, all of the things that we've been dealing with, that we've been saying, all the things that we're trying to have conversations about come to the fore in real time. And then people that want to get out in support and in solidarity find themselves being hit in the same way we are being hit, and then are shocked. And Black people are continually like, why on earth, how can you be shocked? I really have dealt with especially young people are looking at their white counterparts like, how can you possibly be shocked? You know, go ahead.
And for me, the thing that when you said white counterpart, COVID concentrated people's woes, their ills, things that they had maybe been forgiving or excusing with their white counterparts because that's still my white friend I went to college with, and we've spent a lot of time together, and maybe she'll come around, or she has a good heart and she's not racist, but at the same time he or she is not anti-racist. They're two different things. And what I feel COVID has also done to us is
I want to pause you at anti-racist. I want to make a clear statement that it's not enough to be not racist. And I want to just right here in that moment, I want to go a little slow there because I want to talk about the fact that people believe that racism is something that requires hate in your heart for another person or a Black person. Racism is not an emotionally based behavior. It is something, it's just like sexism is not an emotionally based behavior. And all three of us on this video are gay men, and we can be just as sexist as any heterosexual men if we do not constantly unpack the behaviors of sexism that are being drilled into our heads on a daily manner, from buying ice cream, which is a slight porn commercial, to buying
chauvinism. It's there.
We have to constantly unpack that, and that's going to be the same for racism. You cannot just say, I don't hate, and you better not say, I don't see color, because I want you to see me. I need you to see me. I don't. Racist is what I want to say. But go ahead, Darrell.
Yes. And what it's done is allowed people to learn the hard way.
The hardest of ways.
Some people that I know, that many Black people that are somewhat white adjacent, when I have made suggestions that they deal with that and thresh that out, and I've been around them and they've let their white friends say things that were offensive to me, I picked it up and they were like, oh, she's so funny. But
wait, let's go slow right there. Because when we say white adjacent, what do we mean there? We mean when go ahead.
For me, I coined the term when I moved here, 2012. And I started to see how Black men, some Black men, a great number of Black men, many of them I've had the unfortunate chance of meeting, they don't date or see themselves at all. And when I say white adjacent, that means you and your white partner are always at white cultural things.
Mhm.
The brunch table is going to be in a white neighborhood. You're going to be with his or her family. One thing that I appreciated today at the march, it was an interracial couple, Black man, white man. They were holding hands, and the white man had the sign high above his head. I always believe you can love who you want to love. But when we look at the action of the relationship, is white man coming to the fish fry? Is white man at the Black Lives Matter movement? Is white man challenging his racist uncle and stuff like that when they let things slip out at the table when the Black partner is there during the holiday? So that's what I mean by white adjacent, where your culture is compromised and your white partner's culture seems to take over your general behavior and your
Talk
practice.
a little, and let's talk about a little bit about, and Jamal, you can jump in here. Let's talk a little bit about where you hear that joke. You hear that moment. You know, I think all three of us, I probably was with you, have been out in a club and somebody said, "Oh my God, you're so attractive for a Black man."
Oh,
That's been,
G Lounge.
I've heard it.
Honey.
I heard it in North Carolina. I went to a place where it's called Guns and Ammo. Is that a club there in North Carolina? I believe.
Not in my part of the state. Not that I know.
Yeah, but and that was sad. And I've been in another club when I was in Kansas City, Missouri, and somebody came up to a table full of Black men and named us by hip hop people. And we're like, you look like Diddy, and you look like Kanye, and you look like, and went down the list. And all
believe that they're being complimentary. I would have voted for Obama third term.
Oh, in their heart, they believe it.
They really do. Yeah.
And go ahead, Jamal.
No, that's that unpacking that is always a devastation. I think one of the things that as you were talking, Darrell, I thought about my general fatigue, and I think during this COVID-19 time, this quarantine time, and now that this is all happening again, you start to get in touch with how you are feeling about the conversations that you have to this end. You know, oh, it's to your point, Darrell. Oh, I know your heart. I know that you don't hate, you know, me or my family. I know that you don't really think that you're better than me in a conscious place and all that stuff. So there's an investment. So over your life, you have the investments. You have the, let me pull your coat on this and let's have a conversation and all that stuff. And oftentimes it goes well. And what I've done is I've contributed and invested in this particular person for this particular moment in time. But then when I start to look at the bigger picture, you have, you know, 9 minutes of murder, then you go, oh, I'm reminded this is systemic, and my dealing with this person who is closer to the pole of understanding and not wanting to be racist than further away from it than the other side. That these are the people that I've been dealing with. This little incremental sort of, you know, a victory here, a piece of understanding here, a light there, you know, an aha over here. Over the years, you go, and still George Floyd, and still Breonna. You go down the line, and so then you get a sense of fatigue. I go, I'm tired. What am I doing now? Do you know is investment working? Even though I love this person, so when you make the off-color remark and you don't understand why it's problematic, or you don't understand why it's racist, and now we have to go into I have to pull you over to the side. I get tired. I realized during this quarantine how exhausted I am. I didn't know before. And part of the exhaustion, subconsciously, I know that it may not be working.
Go ahead, Darrell, jump in.
And what I was getting to, what COVID-19 was doing, it was making people sit at home and deal with self. Mm-hmm. So that's that exhaustion that you're talking about, like, oh my gosh, what I need to prioritize, what am I going to do next? And as Black folk or people of color are prioritizing, we're like, I can't take another off joke. I'm not excusing anything else. So many people since COVID they gotten in touch with family members. They have repaired things. They have gotten closer to friends, especially those of us that live in big cities and those of us that are artists or people that have to stay on the wheel to make it in big cities that are more expensive to live in. This time alone has allowed people to deal with imbalance. It's allowed them to deal with what they are and aren't going to put up with, like what I did when I turned 40. There were some things I just didn't have room for anymore. I'm just not doing that anymore. So I think that's I think that's something that COVID helped move along, people recognizing what's important, what they were going to deal with, and what they weren't going to deal with.
Well, you know, I think here we are, and I've got a couple of questions, so I'm going to open the floor up to question and answers, but I want to just run back through what we did really quickly for everybody that's listening. First of all, this is not new. So anybody that needs any information, we're not asking, no one needs to be an African-American studies major. It would be helpful if you read a book, but this is not new. You can just participate in Black History Month, pay attention to Martin Luther King's birthday. And if we love Martin Luther King the way we say we love Martin Luther King in this country, it would behoove you to really look at what he actually stood for. He was one of the most hated men in America when he was alive.
Yes.
The writings and speeches.
Book of speeches, not just I Have a Dream, all of them.
Yes.
So it's important that we're saying that all of these things that are happening have been going on, and we have been screaming to our hair is on fire. And so right now, the reaction from a lot of Black people is, I am now tired of educating because I am now in a COVID-19 situation, which I do really have to survive. And one of the first tenets of revolution is survival. My presence is an act of revolution. And if I lose me, I lose it all. So we are no longer in a position to educate. If you didn't want to kneel, now you got to, and I'll just go across a couple of things because I don't want to spend a lot of time on these couple of things because I don't think they matter. So people are asking about looting. Let's just say this about looting.
Let's do looting.
We are the looted people of Africa. We are here because we were looted. Every history museum we've gone into, the artifacts are looted. My husband, every time we walk, we went to the Louvre in Paris, and we went to the African room, which is very small and on the side. And we know that nobody said, oh, by all means, take our sarcophagus. By all means, take our gigantic ankhs. Everything that is here from Black people has been looted. And part of the reason, Trevor Noah said this so wonderfully the other night, he said, you know, there's a social contract in place. We all, not white, not Black, all of us, obey laws, not because we can't break them. There's actually nothing stopping anybody from murdering anybody or doing anything. Laws and punitive measures are for after the fact.
Yes.
You see with police officers, right? Laws and punitive measures are for after the fact. We don't do it because we have a social construct. You don't take that off the shelf and go home with it because we're saying, oh, we have a construct. You obey the laws, you protect that store, I'll work with you. But when you consistently break that contract and break our bodies and destroy our spirits and don't listen to us when we calmly take a knee during a song that is about war, that has a third stanza that is about slavery, that was not always a part of the thing, to draw attention to our death, and you don't want to hear that, and then it happens again. What is the expectation? What is the expectation? I'm not out looting. I'm not condoning it. I don't think we should have been looted. But,
and my thing with looting, why is it all of a sudden an issue if people that have been oppressed and destroyed loot? But it's okay if after one of these big Ivy League football games, the losing team, white folk completely trash neighborhoods. They turn cars over, they burn trash cans, they bust out windows. We've seen all of the footage, but again, that is the end product of systemic racism. Oh, it's okay. It's okay. They're just excited.
Oh yeah. Looting doesn't end there either. I mean, looting is robber barons like Carnegie and Rockefeller sort of discount pillaging. It's not just I picked this up and brought it over here. It's everything in between. It's all the aspects of I am trying to get something for nothing. And if it's on your back, that's fine because it's the American way. And
I mean,
you call that good business. You call it good business if you're a white man in corporate America.
Yeah. Have we seen tax returns? The reason we haven't seen the tax returns, he said, if I don't pay taxes, I won. So what is that telling you? He's saying, I don't pay. So he's saying, if I get away with breaking the law because of a loophole for me, that's just fine.
And
I want to speak very clearly in empathy for people who live in neighborhoods that are being destroyed indiscriminately. It is a terrible thing to undergo. And in no way is anyone here condoning looting. But the media, and when I say the media, I like to be specific, the cable news media wants to report the most salacious parts. The most salacious parts are going to be so they can have the most commercial use. But the truth of the matter, we don't spend 8 hours looking at the food lines all over the country.
And that's been back in during, I mean, this has been forever to the idea of spin control. Because when Katrina happened, when they showed pictures of white people grabbing things, it was that they were surviving. When they showed people pictures of us grabbing things, we were looting.
Just going back to Dr. King, one of my favorite speeches that I share with white Americans who have they've fallen in line with the whitewashing of his activism. He said, when they give stuff to white people, it's a subsidy. When they give stuff to Black people, it's welfare. And he highlighted how they gave millions of acres to white Americans, whether they were Anglo or not. When they wouldn't give Blacks a single square, they gave them the land, they built them colleges, they gave them money to go to school. And then once they got their education and degree in agriculture as a business, they gave them loans to buy tractors, to buy seeds, to buy everything they needed. And then when it comes to us, we have to just do the best we can. And anything that is given to us from even our own tax dollars that we generate in this nation is welfare.
And nothing can save the hireling or the slave from the terror of flight and the gloom of the grave. I think that's the one that's in the third stanza.
Yes, that's the only way I will sing the national anthem, if I can sing that verse.
Yeah, we're gonna do that part.
Just so y'all know, that verse is that Jamal just stated is the third stanza that they leave out of the national anthem.
Yeah.
And just to conclude the looting portion of it, it's devastating if you live in a community that's being looted. It's devastating. However, we understand that Martin Luther King was killed on April 4th. There were riots all over this country, including looting, that cost up to $47 million. And on April 11th, 1968, the Civil Rights Act was passed.
Yes.
So we have, now Martin Luther King all his life was talking about the Civil Rights Act, but until there was a pressing loss of money revenue, what we understand is that our counterparts in this country, the powers that be, not our neighbor, the white man, the wealth of whiteness in this country only understands lack of money or violence. The question about anything else, they will keep the status quo. I'm going to move on to a couple of questions.
I put some in the chat.
Okay, and somebody asked if we could break down people like Candace Owens and Paris Bernards of the world. Bernard Gaddis asked that. Hey, Bernard. I just don't want to take up a lot of time, air, oxygen, breath, time, hair on the top of my head for Candace Owens or Paris Bernard. Here's why.
They're lost.
They're lost, but I also don't know that they're honest. I know that there is money to be made by people like Diamond and Silk and Candace Owens and Paris Bernard from being people who kind of step and fetch, coon, shuffle, and juffle for Republicans, because they're going to make more money by being the only one that will say things that no one else will say. It's gonna, the mic is, look at where the microphone is gonna go. The microphone is gonna go directly to the person that is the outlier. It's the way, it's the reason in a community we're fascinated with a Black opera singer and we're fascinated with a white hip hop artist. If a white girl can do some hip hop, she's getting all the TV. If a Black woman can sing opera and do classical ballet, they're getting all the TV. We are fascinated by that dynamic. But those people that you mentioned, Bernard, are not worth the time because they are only being used for their skin. And let's be clear, if it was to become a race riot, they would be the first ones to be lynched. They would be the first ones by the people that they say that care about them to be thrown out. Look at what Omarosa, what did Trump call Omarosa? A dog? That's how that goes.
And she had no country when she was thrown out. She had no country. None of us cared. It was almost like Nanny Boo Boo when you in the sandbox in third grade. Girl, whatever. That listen. When go ahead.
No, I was just saying, politics of cancellation or cancel culture.
And they are the people. I have about as much patience for them as I have for racist, redneck, rebellious white people. I can save that energy and put that into a young mind, or put that into someone who really wants to study and learn to do better.
And just really quickly, I keep saying that, but we're never really quick around here. But one of the things I wanted to add was that there are solutions, and here are the solutions. You ready? Is everybody ready? Everybody got their pen out? Do what you said you were going to do. This is not difficult. What Dr. King and everybody before him and everybody since has been saying is live up to the promise of the Constitution that you gave us. Once you took out that we were 3/5 of the Constitution of a human being, once you took that out.
Once you got rid of that.
Live up to what that says. If you discuss equality, a friend of mine, Shelley Williams, said so eloquently, if you see a room full of white men that looks just like you, change it.
Change it.
Not because you are taking a white man's job. That is not what it is. We are made better by diversity. We are made better by diverging opinions in a room. We are made better. The three of us may be agreeing, for everybody that's watching, but we do not agree all the time. We fight like cats and
fiercely. Great ones. Stay tuned for the next episode.
Yes. We go at it over a good meal all the time.
Yes.
Right. So the solutions really are already there. Yes, voting, but voting in every way. We can
civic, local level.
We can know which things will be most effective by which things they try to oppress the most. What is the number one thing for the Republican Party and the number one thing for Trumpers right now is to destroy the vote. Gerrymander, that's the last thing they wanted to give us. We just got the vote when Barack Obama was born. We just got the ability to vote, the Voting Rights Act that they're trying to gut now. They know that if everyone is able to vote, the idea of oppression for white and Black people will become a thing of the past. Yeah. Because they have to use racism to convince poor white people to vote against their own best interests. They have to use racism to keep us from bonding with our fellow citizens that look different than us. And the only way they can do that is by continually vilifying and using anti-Blackness, which goes back to why we need to say Black Lives Matter full-throated, which is back to why we need to say the COVID-19 cannot be cured if we allow people to languish in the prison industrial complex. We will never get through it. We have to fix all of those things. None of that. COVID-19 is going to keep going as long as we have the prison industrial complex, no health care, no fight. All those things are acts of violence and looting, if you ask me.
It's what King meant when he said you can't have you can't have a first-class nation with second-class citizens.
And that's why Fannie Lou Hamer worked so hard and was so outspoken. And she said, we want to be first-class citizens as far as legal protection and ability. She said, we hold our heads up high. We know who we are. And I also like how she explained looting and rioting perfectly. She said, do you think we are going to peacefully sit by while y'all have everything? She said, no. If we don't get it, at some point, we're going to tear it down. And that is perfect. And she was talking about young people. She said, I don't know why you all don't understand how young men and women, they want to be left alone, have the freedom to do whatever they want, and build wealth. She said, at a certain point, if we don't get it, we're going to tear it down. The Boston Tea Party.
We get about all that. So here's a question I want to bring up. Because somebody asked, are you as gay men affected by the Amy Coopers of the world? And to be clear, Christopher Cooper is a gay man.
Yeah.
To be clear, of course we are, because as gay men, we are Black men. And I don't like the challenge of Black men versus gay men because there's not a versus in the world. I have been called faggot on the same day that I've been called nigger. And sometimes those two things have been conflated. So let's be clear about that. But as it goes, before I am born, I am being discriminated against because of my color. So when we know that Black women in hospitals are dying disproportionately in childbirth, we know that Black babies are having prenatal care that's not there. We know that doctors not believing Black women when they say they're in pain. We know that there's a lot of discrimination going before we even get here. So the reason Blackness precedes my sexuality or my gender or any of those other identities. It's because those come later. That doesn't make them less important. That just means they come later. Mm-hmm. So yes, absolutely, as Black men, we are affected. Does anybody else want to address that?
Okay, let me go. And I'm jumping in a lot because, you know, at this age, I forget stuff. But when I heard of that incident, I started to compartmentalize how I handle myself.
But we don't want you in that, Chris. We don't want you in that. We don't. Ever. We're not going to say if that's you in that situation. You want that to be your story.
What happened?
I don't know that the camera would have came on, but go ahead.
No, but I'm just saying, when I first heard it, I said, I literally was like, would I say that to a white woman in Central Park, in the Brambles? And then I thought, because like my grandmother said, she said, I didn't step down in the street to let white people pass me on the sidewalk because I was afraid of what they would do to me. She said, I had to get home to my babies. She said, that's why I did it. She said, had I been single, I probably would have, she said, she always said, had I been single, I probably would have been dead. She said, but I saw my babies' faces. And for me, I see the goals and the things that I want to do in life. And for me, I would have compartmentalized and said, as long as this dog is not gnawing on my ankle, I don't care what this white woman and her dog do in Central Park, because I'm not going to, at 6'5", my color, Browns, I'm not going to ask a white woman to do anything in Central Park. As long as that dog wasn't gnawing on me, that is my reality as far as how I want to survive. Now, has she been in Marcus Garvey Park or Jackie Robinson Park, I would have been like, girl, get this dog together. But there at Central Park, where the police are always strolling back and forth, and then I thought about the fact that he actually said that. I told a friend of mine, I said, he must have some proximity to white people for him to have that level of audacity to ask a white woman to follow the rules when the rules are clearly posted on signs in the upper, where are the Rambles, west to east?
Upper West.
Upper West Side. So in that, of course, I am affected by the Karens of this world. I work in Tribeca. I'm always affected by the Karens. They at the Whole Foods, they at the Chipotle, they at the little parks with their cheering and stuff like that. I'm always affected by the Karens. I'm not defeated by them, but I am affected by them in the way that I carry myself, because I do want to stay alive, because I do.
I think all three of us. Jamal, go ahead.
No, I was gonna say, I posted this not too long ago, that privilege is not having to represent everyone who looks like you. And the reason that that's important in this,
say it again.
Privilege is not having to represent everyone who looks like you. Mm-hmm. And a white woman has, well, far more privilege than we do, the three of us sitting here. And so the idea I wanted to point out right away, as we talk about the Karens, make no mistake that sort of using Karen as a catch-all or as a demonym to represent people who are vapid and racist, even if they're only vapid and racist in that moment, does nothing to sort of hurt, harm, imprison the privilege of white women in America. Just so that I wanted to say that because we're having this conversation about Amy Cooper.
Yes.
And I definitely would have certainly told, I've done this before because I'm from the Northeast, right? So I was raised to say, you go in the world and you get everything that's rightfully yours. So I certainly have told white women to put their dogs on leashes. I have a dog. I've asked them to move to the side. I've done all of that with this face. I've done all of that. So when I've asked them to move aside, I am very aware that, I mean, what happened to Jamal and I, I'll just share this story. One time, Jamal and I were celebrating Gay Pride. We were closing out the night. We were standing on Chelsea, about 23rd Street and 8th, and we were having a good conversation, laughing and talking with another friend of ours, you know, laughing, closing out the night. It was about 2 or 3 in the morning. We're standing there, and these white guys walk up to us, and they go, hey, are you gay? And we were like, and they kept on going, and they were drunk, and they were like, are you gay? And we were like, I said, I don't really want to engage you right now.
Yeah.
And he was like, oh man, you don't have to be a fucking asshole. And I was like, I'm not engaging you. And then I turned my back, and then he touched my arm, and Jamal had to stop me. Yeah. And I said, if you don't touch my arm, you don't have the right to this conversation and you don't have the right to my space. I
Mhm.
know that you think and he said to me,
I didn't
well,
want to be on the news that night, but carry on.
we almost were, because he said to me, well, you don't even belong in the neighborhood. We're gonna call the cops. I said, don't bother, I'm gonna call the cops. And I picked my phone up and I said, if you don't leave, I'm calling the cops. He said, well, we'll see how that goes. I said, 9. He said, well, we'll see what happens. I said, 1. He said, well, go ahead and call. I said, 1. And I got on the phone, and I am an extremely articulate young man. Well, I was younger then. But I spoke to the cops, and what I have to say about police officers in New York City specifically, and I have to say this about police officers in general, New York police officers don't have time for the mess. So they showed up and they were like, sir, what is going on? And he was drunk and he fell over, and I went on about my business. So although I have a definite clinch when I deal with the police because I know my color, I also have a degree of privilege being in the Northeast, being in New York City, having the education and diction I'm able to access. There's a degree of privilege that I have, which I'm going to take that to segue right into the next question, which is about Black artists.
Yes.
And this moment. So I think every industry, I wrote this and I'll read it to you. I think every industry has to deal with racism and microaggressions within it. I think it is important to address racism and white supremacy wherever it is, because it is detriment to everybody there, including the white people. However, it is important not to conflate racism and the death of actual Black bodies with the feeling of marginalization when you face racism inside of an artistic institution or moment. The conflation of the two things is very important that we keep those things separate. They're distinct, and neither one of them, both should be addressed. But at the moment, we can't really fully address our artistic lives if we don't address our living lives. We have to keep ourselves focused on what it is. So as Black artists, there is definitely a huge degree of racism, microaggression, and especially because we live in a system that gets to codify people, not just Black people, by look, by type. And then you're dealing with a group of people that may not understand the language of look and type, or may be carrying their biases implicit or overt. And they say things to us that are absolutely nuts and crazy. If we sat here and discussed all the things that have been said and done to us in art as being Black and brown people in the world, we would be here for another 3 days. But all I want to say about that is that it's important really that we do not conflate the metaphoric loss of breath and the metaphoric burning down of our systems and structures to the very real loss of life and the really real burning down of structures in our society.
Yes. This is my thing as far as us in the arts is concerned. I think defining your pursuit or defining how you want to work as a theater or dance or what practitioner is important. I've learned a lot about artists since I've been here in New York. I have learned that many of the ones that I have met have not had the experience that I've had. All of my educational environments have been pretty much safe spaces because they have all been Black, from kindergarten through undergrad. I have never been in a place as an artist where I had to explain my lingo, my haircut, my physicality, the way I talk. I've never been perceived as a threat because I got excited, or a group of kids in my high school, we were like talking or whatever. That was never perceived as a threat. I have always been allowed to approach my art through the centrality of my race. That's something I got that from Toni Morrison, and she said she didn't get that until she read African writers like Chinua Achebe. She said they were able to just write. She said, she said even when I read Black writers, well-known Black writers, you could always hear that white man or that white woman right there. So what I like to highlight is why we are so pressed to be in certain areas as Black artists. And when you face certain levels of discrimination, racism, stuff like that, why are you still pursuing that space? Is it because you just gotta pay bills? Is it because you actually look at their work or their art that you should aspire to? And what I said when people were upset around the lack of representation with the Sondheim birthday celebration on YouTube, I said it's perfectly fine to respect his work. It's incredible. But the problem comes in when you see his work that does not have a single role for a Black person. When you look at that work and put it above your own or your worth, and you keep shooting for that, then we have the problem. So for me, this issue with racism within the arts world, I understand specifically that we have to deal with certain things because we have to earn money. But what I get confused is why the pursuit is always their art, their company, their rubric, or their litmus. That's what I'm trying to understand.
And I always say part of the answer to that is that it's part of the education, not just the textbook education that we have in school, but also the arts education is sort of contaminated with these notions and ideas that this is better. Do you know what I mean? This is what we should aspire toward. And then the Tonys, and then the Grammys, and then the Oscars. And I mean, the Oscars so white. We've done it. We've been there and done it. And so all of that sort of kind of trickles down into the process. And then we have to work to, as you said, get rid of that little voice that Toni Morrison talked about that is there. For me, the reason that the arts are different, and this kind of, I mean, Brian and I talked about it before, and it's something that we can actually do in another one of these at some point, because I think it actually deserves that, is the idea that there's no HR, generally speaking, inside of art and arts creation and all of the jobs and things that we do. So you're starting in a place where we're casting a show, and this is what we're like, and we're going to actually put on paper, this needs to be a blonde and she needs to be this age, or this needs to be a white man who is blah, 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 blah. And there may be any number of legitimate reasons that have everything to do with the context of the story that we're telling that mandate that this is what the casting breakdown is, right? So you start out in an industry that has to do away with sort of standardized rules of engagement that HR is put in place just to make sure are handled and respected in corporate America, right?
Yeah. Okay, and I'm going to ask this question. Somebody asked, and I'm going to put two of them together. Somebody said, having gone to a primarily white school and having been in a lot of white spaces as a contemporary dancer, how do I take time for myself when I'm inundated with folks asking me how to be a better ally? What can they do? How can we move forward? I'm tired. I'm grieving. I'm personally am doing the work to advocate for my people and have to experience microaggressions and racism every day. I also feel the responsibility to share and overextended myself so we as people of color are heard. Where's the balance and how do I pass this responsibility? And then the next part of the question from someone else says, how can this is from Sean Davis, take time for himself when he is inundated with questions from his white friends on how they can be better allies? They have questions like, what can I do? How can we move forward? So I want to just address that because I kind of addressed it for us in general, but I'll address it more specifically. I have not had any white friends doing that. And I don't know that Darrell has, and I don't know that Jamal has. Has anybody raised their hands a little bit?
I haven't.
I haven't either. And I think part of the reason is that curating your life regularly and living forward regularly is important. I think that when we as Black people accept microaggressions from people that are close to us on a regular basis, we set up relationships with people that we haven't really vetted in terms of race and how they feel about us. I'll give you an analogy. When I got married and Jamal was in my wedding and Darrell was at my wedding, when every wedding vendor I went to, I would say, my husband, Johan, and I, and then I would pause. Mm-hmm. And I would look to see if there was any inkling, any smattering of homophobia, because I'm not giving you my money, we're not engaging. And I'm not suggesting you test every white person in your life, but I'm suggesting you speak freely about who you are so that you can cultivate an environment of people that really understand you before we're in crisis. Yeah. And I think that constant self-care of yourself, putting yourself as a Black person or person of color and your needs, your emotions first. Don't let people talk you out of your emotional needs in your personal life. You need to be able to feel comfortable and full. And if you don't feel comfortable and full, you're cultivating and curating a group of people who don't really know or understand the depth of you. And now when we crash into this moment, right, where, because I've been the only Black, and I know Jamal has been the only Black in circumstances. When we crack, I have always been told, why is everything about race since Tupac died? I was talking about how the police don't want to find that. And for me, I've always been unapologetic about my Blackness. So the people that don't understand that, or the conversation needs to be had around that, are had long before we're in crisis. So now that we're in crisis, if you find yourself with people saying, what can I do? You can tell them to take their finger and go like this, Google, and you can pull up, just start at a 101 Martin Luther King. Just start at the person we all say we love, and if you look deeper, maybe not so much, you wouldn't, but start there. Start at Black History Month. Start at the holiday. Start with Black American authors that are Pulitzer Prize winning, like Alice Walker. Start with reading The Color Purple. Don't start with me.
Right, and you know, I think in that, I'll speak from my own experience. Some days I have the energy to teach. Some days I don't. I have had people down through the years asking, well, what can I do? I've had people to come up to me in person during weeks like this where riots have been going on and stuff like that. And some days I'll be like, I don't know. And some days I'll have a few minutes. And when I have those minutes, I tell people a few things. I said, I know you're not going to do the exhausting work of really learning about my people from a place of legitimate concern. What you're seeking now is absolution.
And attention.
And attention. So I tell them, listen, I'm not talking to you until you have watched the documentary that PBS produced some years back called Slavery by Another Name. I said, we can't have any more conversations until you have watched that with a pen and paper or your notepad open on your computer, whatever, taking down everything that you don't specifically know about. And I tell them that because that particular documentary, many people did not watch when I was suggested before they watched 13th. Because a lot of people don't want to do the work of finding anything on their own. They want what's on a billboard. They want what's on a commercial. They want what's zooming by on Netflix. That particular documentary tells you what happened to African people after the Emancipation Proclamation was.
But the real problem is that it's zooming by. It is on the Netflix billboard. You can watch 13. You can watch When They See Us.
No. I'm saying from a place of pedagogy, setting like a curriculum that's successful for them, they can watch When They See Us after they've watched Slavery by Another Name, because that documentary will allow them context, and they don't have any excuse for not knowing systemic oppression and stuff like that. So that's just my example, giving them information as to what happened, because they know slavery happened. So I give them that documentary because it gives you what happened exactly after slavery moving forward. And then
moving on to Jamal, but I also in that education, the question about taking care of yourself, you first, boo. That's what I'm saying to everybody Black. You first. You don't have to teach another person. You actually don't even have to go to a march right now. You need to take care of yourself. You need to be well and healthy, and you need to survive this moment. That's what I want to say to every Black person that can hear my voice. You have to survive. That has to be. And then after you survive, after you take your mask and put it on first, everybody loves that analogy, but are we really listening?
Right.
Take your mask, put it on first. Get yourself mentally, emotionally, spiritually, and physically well. Yeah. And then, and only then, can you entertain questions about your entire culture. Only then can you and then really be discerning about the way and why someone's asking. Are they asking you currently out of guilt? And you can say that because you can't assuage guilt. Right. And were they hearing before, or were they just not believing you before?
Yes.
And asking the question
also, I need to get my charge.
Opportunity.
Go ahead. The rest getting it, everybody.
That part. In other words, why are you asking the question? Your interest in discerning that is also it should be met with, oh yeah, why am I asking the question? That's a part of it. And if that reaction doesn't happen, that tells you a whole lot about your engagement with this person. To Brian's point about curating your life and curating the people in it in such a way. And some of that happens organically. I thought about it. And even though I'm the only person on here who raised my hand about that, the two instances I had with white friends who asked me or who dealt with me on this issue of what to do. One was someone who, you know, I asked, how have you been during this quarantine, blah, blah, blah. And she said, you know, hey, I've been, you know, just kind of figuring it out and raising the baby, and I'm pregnant with another, and I'm trying to do all that. And then she said to me, you know, and trying to figure out what I can do as a white person, or like how, you know, where I fit into all this. And then what I did is I started to, you know, as if it were an invitation automatically, I started to insert, well, here's some things that I think you can do. And she says, oh no, you know, I'm sorry if that sounded like, you know, a question or an invitation. I know that that's my responsibility. I'm not putting that on you. And I really appreciated that moment. So to the point of curating your space and the people in it, it's interesting that this is a white person in my space. So I want to qualify that because I think it's an important distinction to make, to Brian's point earlier. The other thing is the educational piece of it. I think it has to be about the lens, about encouraging people to change the lens, not necessarily with the expression white gaze, although that's a part of it. The white gaze is, you know, I mean, we deal with it all the time, particularly when we're talking about, you know, literature and Toni Morrison, and how she was impacted by that. But the lens, how are you looking at learning? Meaning, if you see a Black person doing something, I remember, and I think I wrote a blog about this about 4 years ago, about why I don't like to rent red cars. And there's a reason I don't rent red cars. And I remember the woman on the opposite side of the Hertz counter in Los Angeles was baffled. She didn't understand why a young man wouldn't want, she thinks I'm younger than I am. Anyway, didn't understand why a young man would want to drive a red car and zoom around, don't do this, zoom around town in it. And there was a Black woman behind me, and she was waiting, and she was about my mother's age. And she said, no, you're right. You should wait for the other car. And it's because we understand that we're pulled over disproportionately relative to our white male counterparts. And that if I'm in a red car, any kind of red car, I am increasing my likelihood of being pulled over for being Black and driving.
Yeah.
Well, and just moving forward with the idea of self-care and balancing that, you have to really take care of yourself. That's what I would say to all the young Black people or older Black people who are dealing with people inundating them with questions. It is not your job. This is a system that was created by white people on Black people, and your family has the answers to why this system exists in the way that it does. Have conversations, direct them back to their own community, as opposed to just having conversations with us and wanting us to heal and feel and coddle, because that's not something we can do.
Yeah.
I'm gonna
just to finish that point. The idea was this white person at the Hertz wasn't looking or asking the question, why? Why doesn't he want to be in a red car? That's right. If that particular white person had been able to change the lens and start to look at those things, you're looking at a Black person, here's a Black person making a decision. I'm sure I'm not the first one. Start asking why and let that inform your Google.
And change the lens and look around. The thing is this. I think what white people are having to wake up to is look around you. You are not the apex. You know, and it's very simple. Look at that person over there, and what are they telling you? And I really believe this, and maybe I'm just cynical. You didn't not hear me. Some of you didn't believe me when I told you. So when we told you we were being killed by police, when we told you about Emmett Till, there's a large group of people who were like, we don't know what Emmett Till did. There was a large group of people who had that feeling.
And we can't make these assumptions with people because they don't have any education, they don't have information, which is what allows people context. Yeah. If she knew the stats on how much people in red cars were pulled over, she would then be able to pair that with the knowledge of how Black people are treated when they're pulled over. But she doesn't have any education, so she doesn't have any context.
Which goes back to the education about Black people being selected and elected. Somebody wanted to ask, why does the term Karen, I'm going to take this and we're going to move past this. Somebody asked, why do the Karens of the world think the term Karen is comparative to nigger? There is no term comparative to nigger. I'm going to say it 2 times.
None.
There is no term comparative to nigger. There is no term comparative to nigger. Karen is because nigger was made in conjunction with racism to describe something that didn't exist, to further vilify a group of people. The terms of nigger do not exist. Those terms were created to vilify people that were not that. And so when Karen literally co-opting a Black phrase to talk about how your privilege is being oppressed while you remain in privilege is literally the most Karen thing you can fucking do.
Yes.
It is. That's just no such thing. They think that because of their privilege, because a lot of white people conflate feelings of threat with actual threat. So I feel threatened, so that's a real thing, as opposed to I am threatened. If I grab your neck right now, you're threatened. If I say, hey, get out my face, I feel threatened, which is also why we're being killed by the police disproportionately, because the emotions of white people are over the lives of Black people.
Yes. And within all of these things, the sight of brown skin, no matter how light or dark the hue, triggers a different assessment of the actual danger that they may or may not be in.
Which goes back to your terms about education. If we had an educational system that was fully encompassing all of the colors, that is not something that would be there. Somebody wants us to unpack the term ally and discuss what that really is. And I'll start it off and I'll just say this. It's not about allyship. It's not about only looking over at me. It's looking at me as if I am you. It's the golden rule, but one step further. Do unto others as you would have them do unto you, but even further. Look at me as if I am you, because everything you need, I need. Every single thing. I need air, I need life, I need love, I need to pursue, I need all those things. So sometimes when people, I said this to somebody and their white fragility kicked in, they got very hurt. They were on a friend post, James Hartness, who's a good friend of ours, and they were saying their condolences to James in this moment and saying he couldn't understand his pain, but his condolences go out. And I said, I want to encourage you to do more than your condolences to go out and understand and start to feel this as if your life was actually in threat. Imagine what it would be like if it was you. And how would you feel if you were marginalized behind your whiteness? If you reversed the world and we were all Black and it was all white, what would that feel like? Do that exercise in your brain. And he got very offended, was like, I'm just trying to help. And maybe as an ally, you shouldn't be chastising me because it makes me want to be quiet, which makes me know you are a racist. You're not an ally because you think you're doing me a favor. And what the truth of the matter is the only reason the United States can hold its head up high as not a third world country is because Black people have continued to press forward and refuse to be oppressed behind the terminologies used to oppress us. So needing your help from me is not what needs to happen. You need to change racism for you. But go ahead, Darrell.
And for me, I don't like the term ally because people actually take action from a place of, let's do some outreach. I cannot stand the term outreach because it generally carries the energy of, let us go show these people how they can be more like us. I don't know what the new term should be, but I don't particularly like ally and outreach. A lot of people go into the work saying, I am particularly a little bit better and I'm going to help these people get to where I am. Now, some people actually really do want to use the general privilege of their existence to help other people because they get it and they understand it. And those other people who are non-Black people, they can hang in a conversation with us without getting frustrated, without losing their train of thought, but they are an anomaly. They are nowhere near the majority at high percentages or anything. So for me, the term ally, I've normally experienced it from a place of, okay, let me help them.
Well, it's a place of superiority.
Yes.
somebody once tell me if we were just having, I've had many diversity inclusion conversations, and they usually end up in white tears. And I literally mean white tears, because within 10 minutes of the conversation, using the term white supremacy, white privilege too many times starts to hit home, it starts to hurt. So then it gets frustrating and we can't handle it and we can't have the conversation, because we don't understand that when we talk about whiteness, we're talking about the term of supremacy, not the individual color of your skin. When we
call themselves white and Ta-Nehisi Coates and all of that stuff. And yeah.
Right. So when we have that conversation, I mean, Jamal, where are you with Ally? And everybody that's listening, we were opening up the floor for questions. So if you have questions, go ahead and put them in the chat and we'll take them.
Yeah, we're multitasking here. The Ally, part of it is, for me, it's I don't love the term, but I actually also haven't heard it coming from white people who care about me as often either. And that may go back to the whole idea about, you know, curating your life. Those people know better. I mean, those people in my life, they don't, that's not how they approach this. For me, the idea is it's not necessarily about you being an ally to me specifically. It's about you dealing with your life in terms of, this is right, number one. This is right.
This is the right.
Yes. I mean, like, it is not right for him to, you know, there's no circumstance under which putting your knee on his neck
for 8 minutes
is right, with him handcuffed, with him, all this stuff. There's no rightness. So you start from a place of, am I doing this because I am an ally to Black people? No, I am doing this. I am out here because that's just fucking wrong. Like,
and we start with King saying, injustice anywhere is injustice everywhere. If we go with that principle, if I see a woman being assaulted, I'm there because that's wrong.
Right.
I'm not there for the woman, I'm there for the case of right. And if we stand up for what's right, you don't need to have a 101 knowledge of how I do my hair, or what shea butter is, or how somebody locks their hair, or what books I've read. You need to just stand up for what's right. But the anti-blackness that's being pumped into the systemic oppression, it's being pumped into the TV stations, it's being bumped onto the Broadway stage. The systemic vilification and dehumanization of Black skin is what makes
the appropriation of it.
Right. It makes the pause happen when something happens to me. It makes, somebody I saw today, and I wish I could remember her name, but she said white people need to put their bodies in front of Black people, because your bodies are the commodity. And I saw that a couple of times in the march.
Yes.
A line of white people standing in front of a line of Black people, because that is going to change the lens. That is going
to be done more. I mean, I want to say on MSNBC, I can't remember Doug's, I can't remember his last name, but he's the CEO of American Airlines. And he was saying, you know, we need to do more. Like, meaning as a company, American Airlines, we need to do more. And we are #1 in all the things. With the human rights at HRC, they've decided that we 17 years straight, we've ranked in the top 5 for diversity and inclusion of all companies in America, and how we deal. And of course, that rating has to do with so many factors about how they conduct their business, hiring practices, and all of those things. And so he's saying, in the context that, well, there's actually more to do. But nowhere in that did I hear the word or feel like he was saying we are an ally. He was about the work of it. He was about this is Steve Wozniak also was on MSNBC this morning discussing, or he's the co-founder of Apple, just in case anyone needs to know that. But he was discussing how there's disparity. There's disparity all over corporate America, that Apple has done its best to sort of stay above the fray as far as all that's concerned. But he said, there shouldn't be
where they source the materials for their phones.
That part. But the idea is that if they're getting good ratings from someone, I know they're not getting the HRC rating that American Airlines is getting, because they have people who are 6 over there making phones for like $2 an hour. But the idea is that if there is a rubric that we are using as a standard for whether or not you are doing the work, regardless of whether or not the three people in this particular chat agree that that rubric is acceptable. If there is one, why is it that only this company is meeting all of it, all the requirements?
Like, cheat off your friend's paper, right? Cheat off Ben and Jerry's. Ben and Jerry's had such a wonderful statement. I'm going to read a little bit of it for you guys.
It was fantastic.
They said, and this is towards the end. First, if you go to Ben and Jerry's website, they say, we must dismantle white supremacy. That's on the front page of their website. And then they have a whole dossier, and they said, and finally, we call on the Department of Justice to reinvigorate its Civil Rights Division as a staunch defender of the rights of Black and Brown people. The Department of Justice must also reinstate policies rolled back under the Trump administration, such as consent decrees to curb police abuses. Unless and until white America is willing to collectively acknowledge its privilege, take responsibility for its past, the impact it has on the present, and commit to creating a future steeped in justice, the list of names that George Floyd has been added to will never end. We have to use this moment to accelerate our nation's long journey towards justice, a more perfect union, Ben and Jerry's. So cheat off your friend's paper. Ben and Jerry's is two white men. Ask them.
And what Ben and Jerry's, I'm going back to a term that was mentioned a few minutes ago. What Ben and Jerry's is saying, humanize Black people.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of people don't understand how and why things happen to certain people because they have been dehumanized. Like you said, Brian, if something happens to a certain group of people, nobody really pays attention because they've been dehumanized. So Trump spent all of his time in his campaign dehumanizing immigrants, dehumanizing Mexican Americans, so that when there came a time for an ICE administrative warrant to be issued, not a judicial warrant, and they're going and taking parents from their jobs so that the children have nobody to come pick them up from school, or when they're making these people sleep on concrete, because a chunk of America agreed with the process of dehumanization, whether they knew they were complicit or not, they had no empathy, no sympathy, and nobody raised any hell. Just like within certain other communities, I'll say in our community, with the LGBTQIA plus community, we saw Ayanna Dior, that is her name, and she has been identified in social media. We saw her being beat and pulverized, a Black trans woman, in a store, and she only got to safety by going behind the counter because that group of people, Black trans women, have been so horribly dehumanized. Nobody is enraged when those people are beaten, murdered, discriminated against, can't get a job, can't get housing. So what Ben and Jerry's is saying, we have to humanize these people. We have to give them visibility. We have to get upset when they are mistreated. And even if we know everybody's not going to get upset, we who have the conscious mind to do so, we have to fight to put laws in place to protect them or provide stiffer penalties when people mistreat them.
And I think that's a good place for us to start closing out. And what I think is a great place where we are is that when we're talking about solutions, that's a great solution. The next time we talk, we will be talking about intersectionality, but I just want to briefly go past this. If we do not care about people who are not us, if we do not cross the care, if I as a Black cis man do not care about a Black woman or a trans woman, if a Black heterosexual man does not care about the gay man, if the gay man doesn't care about the trans man, if the white person doesn't care about the Asian person, we will never succeed. We will continue to run around and all of us like rats looking for the biggest piece of cheese and oppressing the other rats. Yes. There is a systemic structure that lives on our need to be above the other person and not share with them. If we use this moment to see all of our humanity, it's very simple. It's really simple. But you cannot say Black Lives Matter and you don't give a damn if a trans woman is beaten to death. You cannot say Black Lives Matter if you don't give a damn and you call gay men faggot on a regular basis. Yes. You can call Black Lives Matter if you don't care if Black women are raped by other Black men. If you don't want the Black men that are raping Black women to be exposed, you don't mean Black Lives Matter. If you don't care about me being oppressed as a gay man and having my rights taken away from me, because trust me, the taking away, dehumanizing one of the ways that serial killers practice is on the people that are most marginalized.
Yes.
Serial killers practice on prostitutes and poor people, and there are documentaries all over the place about that. But that's also how the system practices. They perfected this policing on Black people. So right in front of the White House, when Trump wanted to have his faux press conference, they beat the crap out of white people. They shot at rubber bullets in the face of white reporters. They are dehumanizing Caucasian reporters. So, but they have practiced this for a very long time on Black and brown people. We all have to care about one another, and starting with dismantling the ones that is the least of these, the anti-Blackness of it all, is the root, is one of the roots to the other. White supremacy, anti-Black racism, capitalism. Those things work together.
Capitalism.
And capitalism.
Hierarchies, economic hierarchies.
And those hierarchies work, and they get us to a place where we have Trump, an unmanaged pandemic, and police killings in the street. They get us to a place where we not only can't breathe physically, we can't breathe metaphorically, because we don't even have the creature comforts that we used to have in order to, we don't even have 6 months ahead to think, I'm just gonna focus on my goals, because that's what we do as Black people, right? We go, I'm just gonna focus. Yes, that's somebody dead, but I'm gonna focus on trying to be the one that makes it. The point is, you won't be the one.
Because what happens with that is your compartmentalization and your prioritization in the face of all of this trauma causes you to suppress 1 or 2 or 10 or 15 things that you need to deal with, but you have to survive. That's why I love how Dr. Joy got an education to understand and teach people how and why we are so angry generationally, how we are so poor generationally, how we just can't seem to get it right generationally. And then when you throw in the fact that she talked about there has been no therapy, there has been no assistance, there has been no care to fix anything. And she talked about if I have a child and I don't have any help with all this post-traumatic slavery syndrome or disorder, and I'm going to put all of my ills into that child unless something intervenes. But historically, we have seen that has not. So at some point, which is why I think I'm throwing something else out there, therapy is so important for us because we get a chance to break down all of the stuff that we are suppressing. And we think that our cognitive existence is what runs us on a daily basis. But if you sit down with anyone of their salt, a therapist, they will tell you if you have not pulled all this stuff together in your subconscious, it's going to come out. It's going to come out at the wrong time.
And go ahead, Jamal.
No, go ahead. Finish this thought. I wanted to add one more thing before you go.
Oh, I was just going to say that in terms of how we move forward from here, the systems are in place for us to access. So first take care of you. Be well. Take care of you. Find therapeutic assistance. There are a lot of things online that are cheap. There are a lot of places that offer pro bono work. And if you have a sliding scale that take based on your income, get help. Find a way, because even if you think you're fine, nobody's fine right now.
That's actually what I was gonna comment on.
But I'll forward from there just to say, as you're getting well, then the next step will be civic duty and social duty and plugging into local networks. Because guys, we're going to get through this moment, and we are going to get through this moment. But after we get through this moment, this is not going to end. If we get rid of Trump and we get the next president, and we have a Black vice president, and we have all the things we want, I think I've been toying with this a lot. I'm sorry, Jamal, but I've been toying with this a lot. The idea, peace wants to rest. So when you're at peace, you want to rest. So what happens for us is we get 3 steps forward and we get at peace and we rest. We don't feel like we need to vote in those midterms elections. We're not seeing somebody killed on TV. So we don't feel like that's a big deal right now. I'm able to go to brunch. I have a job. I don't want to, and that's the nature of peace. But peace.
That was one of the issues post-integration.
Yeah.
Many of us felt, oh, we can now do whatever we want. And it got so bad with many people, it got to the place where they refuse to talk about our past. We approach it with a level of shame, but there are other communities of people who have statements like, never forget. And not only will we never forget, nobody else will ever forget.
Yeah.
None of you, and we will put our money, we will put our hearts, our blood, sweat, and tears. So that situation with the rest and being at peace, things were too insular. I'm okay, so I'm not going to do anything else. And I think that's what happened. People stopped educating. I'm talking about in our Black communities. People stopped educating their Black kids on where we came from, and that's how that slide happened, and the desire to fight started to wane.
Yeah, I was just gonna. The only thing I was adding to your point, Brian. Kevin Thomas posted something that I have and will include either on my wall or on this conversation. That is a comprehensive resource. It's a Google Doc that has places that you can go for your mental wellness, places that you can go online and find out more information about this, places that you can look for information about your civic duty and how to go about that, and the impact that voting in this election has over this particular set of issues that might be affecting your community. And one of the other things it also has is a resource specifically for white people who want to understand the things that they need to understand about this. So and I thought it was really interesting that it was sort of collated and very organized in that way, so that whatever demographic needs they can find whatever it is that will happen in this moment.
And all I want to say to Black folk right now is it's really important to keep focused, right? And we all deal with microaggressions, and truth has to be told. But it's also really important not to allow yourself to be manipulated or be pushed into a place of opportunism, because this is becoming a bandwagon thing to do.
Yes.
Every time we get to the heat of a moment, there are always, and we can't prevent that, we're not a monolith. And when I say we're not a monolith, I mean that. There are Black people who are going to jump on a bandwagon because it's going to be very popular to talk about this right now. But this is not about the job you didn't get. It's not about the role you didn't receive. This is not about the way somebody talked cross to you. My mother used to say to me, and Jamal's mother was similar, when you call racism, when you discuss racism, that clarity of that moment has to be very clear. It doesn't have to be perfect. You can talk about your feelings. You can say, I felt this, and we should be listened to and believed when we discuss it. So you're not laden with the burden of proof that it was racism. But when it's important that we are genuine in our aspect of being distinct about the mission at hand. And the mission at hand right now is dismantling white supremacy and dismantling the systems of racism that get us killed and don't allow us to breathe. And that end up with a director I know, Charles Randolph Wright, wrote a wonderful thing about having a gun to his head. I have friends that were on the way to stage doors that were pulled out of cars and didn't make it because they got arrested on the way to stage doors. Not because they did anything, but because the cops decided to pull them over.
Oh, I have a friend who was on a tour, and an older white person on the tech staff at that theater touched his face and said, "Oh, it doesn't rub off." So this is not law enforcement. This is not a political official. This is someone who works in tech at the theater that you are going to work in as the lead in the show. Your face is on the billboard. You know what I'm saying? And going back to you saying take care of yourself, what I want to mention is that this work can be exhausting.
It is exhausting.
It's always, some days are lighter than others. Like some Mondays, I'm like, okay, let me help get some information. But if you don't take care of yourself and the imbalance is there, it can be very exhausting. But it's always been that. All of our elders and ancestors were exhausted. We have to roll up our sleeves. Now we have to understand when to take a break, but you can't quit because it gets tough. Someone asked me a while ago, well, what is the one thing we can do? I said, honey, there are so many things that are to be done. The one thing that we can do is not get weary in our well-doing. And there are different ways to figure that out. But I just wanted to say and get it out that this is going to be exhausting at some points. And you're going to give up, you're going to whatever. But figure out how you can keep pushing and
run this moment with put your foot on the gas and don't let up, but just go 40 miles an hour. Everybody don't need to go 100 miles an hour in this race. You don't need to be at the front fighting a police officer off with a shield every time something happens. You can be at a 40, and what I mean by 40 miles an hour with your gas, pay attention to your local election. Pay attention to the local chapters of NAACP or Black Lives Matter or Black organizations that are around. Any organization that's working that you want to be involved in, pay attention to the Black children in your neighborhood. What things are there that you can help with? Do you teach? Can you donate time? How can you? And just do that 40% of the 10% of the time. Yeah. Right. And instead of scrolling through Instagram for all hours and looking at all of the people doing dance steps or all the naked people, take 10 minutes out of that and say, I'm going to look over here at these causes and deal with what I'm going to do, and stay civic minded. They don't teach civics in schools anymore. No. And that is evident in how people do not understand civics. If you understood civics, you would understand that your local, who is your sheriff? Yeah. Who is the district attorney in your district?
At some point, we will do, I just wanted to what you just said, point out, at some point we will do something about, we need to dedicate some time to people naked on Instagram, the naked pictures. We got to do that. I also, Keisha asked what I thought on creating a Black Wall Street again. I'm assuming she was like the one in Tulsa in 1920s. That was bombed in 1921, and I think that might be something that we knock around for a show in the future, pending our conversations with Brian. I just wanted to say,
Keisha, that's a whole show, but I'll just say this: that Black wealth, white wealth, does not exist. Black wealth in the United States outside of white wealth does not exist, and the times that we've amassed it, what happened at Black Wall Street? Bulldozed. Woo! Matter is, as much as this is about dismantling anti-Black racism, the truth of the matter is, if white people don't get it together and get there and fix this, we are going to continue this. We can create Black Wall Street, we can create another dance company, we can create our Black Broadway, you can create all the Black entities. If white supremacy still is there, they will see that as a threat and they will destroy it.
And just to go historically, prior to Tulsa, because a lot of times we have references as we have them, and a lot of times people don't understand that Black people were making money and establishing wealth in Reconstruction after the Emancipation Proclamation. Keisha, you can look up the Freedmen Bank.
By the way, I got it wrong.
Oh, look up the history of the Freedmen Bank. This bank was set up for freed Africans to have a bank account, save up money, invest. The president of that bank, I cannot remember his name. The president of that bank decided he was going to dilly-dally with the money, do all kind of investments, do all kind of stuff. Ultimately, the bank closed and there was all the Black money gone. So before there was a Tulsa, there was the Freedmen Bank. And what we can do as far as amassing Black wealth, we can do what we can in as much as we are able, day in, day out. We can do the best that we can, but we also have to understand, like Brian said, we are not the heads of the banks. We are not comptrollers. We are not in these positions. And ultimately, the government could at any time, to all of us, seize our assets and say, listen, we need to have a conversation. Just like under eminent domain, the government can come take your house if they want to build a highway through it. So the idea of a Black Wall Street is fantastic and amassing wealth, but I don't want people to ever think that Black people gave up after Tulsa or Black people squandered a land of goods.
People moved to Harlem, and the Harlem Renaissance happened after that, actually.
After the Harlem Renaissance, there's a documentary that tells about how the CIA put crack deliberately into Harlem to destroy it. So it happened all over the country. So it's really important that we understand we should take care of each other in as much as we are able. But there is, and this sounds so kumbaya, but there really is no going forward without our neighbors. We live on one soil, actually live on one blue dot in the middle of the sky. So we have to, all of us, and that goes back to COVID-19, the revealer. It has revealed, what have they been telling Donald Trump since he started? You cannot be America only, America only. You have got to partner with the world. You have to be part of the global economy and thought. You have to be part of the Paris Accord. You have to be part of the World Health Organization. you need to partner with all these organizations so that we can prevent this. Had we been clued in and connected, we would have been able to marginalize the effect of COVID-19, just like we did Ebola, just like we did the other Zika and other diseases that hit us. The only other time that we let this happen in my life was with AIDS, because once again, the propaganda made it an African disease first, then a gay man's disease after that. If we don't continue, if we don't intersect and take care of each other, we will perish.
And that's why I say in the beginning of this COVID situation, it popped in my spirit literally like a lightning rod. I said, I am so glad COVID did not find its seat in Black or brown gay people. I am so glad, because the response would have been very different.
Stigmatizing forever.
Everybody would have been dead, because they would have let that grow until it was unable to be contained. And so they didn't, even with AIDS and HIV, there was no rush to fix this. Mm-hmm. It was, oh, that's them over there, which they tried to do on the back end. They tried to do on the front end when, your president wanted to call it China every 3 seconds and make it a Chinese disease, and come to find out it was coming around from Europe.
Right.
Come to find out that was what was happening. So by the time you close the door, I mean, we really have to think, Black people do have to take care of one another. We have to heal and be well, but we have to understand that without an integral understanding of how we all work together in the ecosystem of the United States, we will end up going back to zero. If you know about MOVE.
Yeah, that was something else I thought about too with COVID-19, just in the quarantine. One of the few times I've gone into Manhattan, I was at Bryant Park, and I was noticing how green everything was. I mean, like it, as if somebody painted all of this green. And I thought, oh, Mother Nature's really, really enjoying this moment right now.
Yeah.
It was a reminder to me. It was a subtle QT reminder that if we don't address that too, if we don't address, speaking of sort of world and community, if we don't address how we're dealing with the world, how we're dealing with waste, what we are doing to it, emissions, all of that stuff, if we don't really, really get a handle on it, then we're going to continue to be in quarantine. We're going to have it's going to be something else. This is going to keep going, because we have not bonded as a community, as a globe, to figure out what we're going to do.
And we as 14% of the under 20% of the population, Black people cannot fix it.
No.
And so I want to also tell Black people, we have been doing it. Because there's this mentality that, oh, we got to do more. Oh, look at them over there. We're going to be good and bad, and we have the right to be good and bad, because that's what humanity is. But the reality,
we're going to do a show on that too, good and bad.
Mm-hmm. So, so Stephen is watching with the kids. Stephen who?
Yes. Hey, Stephen.
Oh, Stephen Gabriel. Hey, Stephen.
Hi, Stephen.
Stephen is one of my good white people. He understands. He gets it.
Can I just tell you, one of the things that this takes me back to is my dad is on here, Philip Miner, and he's here, and my mother, they are, those that went to Pacific University at that time, during what was like Black Power, they all were very close, and they still are. And one of the things that they talked about all the time is, we don't like the OFAs, we don't like them, except my white people, except my not my white people. They're all some racist, they blah, 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 not my white people. And I find myself having those moments all the time where I'm like, yeah, not my white people wouldn't do that.
Where she was like, the white people that are friends with me don't ask me that. And I think we just go back to, there is distinction to be made, so we need to be honored. I want you to see my Blackness, but only through commonality and connection will we be able to heal this moment. That's the truth of the matter. And we have the tools to do it. It just matters if we have the want. And we have the tools. We do. I know this is hard for everybody. I know COVID-19 is impossible. It is devastating. And the Trump administration is a daily deluge into the worst dystopian nightmare you could imagine. Mm-hmm. But we can make it out of it if we say no. Right. If we say we're not going to, if we decide that this is not what it's going to be, that's not what it's going to be. Because the truth of the matter is, humanity made it all up. Yeah. We made up that this is a piece of paper, not money. We made it up. Yeah. It's all made up, Black and Blackness made up. We can make a difference. So I want to leave everybody. I thank everybody for joining in this evening. I want to thank my co-host, Jamal Story and Darrell J. Hunt. Please look for them on their social media. Darrell has about 85 of them. Jamal is a little bit of a nerd, so you'll have to look a little deeper. I'm somewhere in the middle, but we're around.
So we are like this every time, though. The hair is going to be out next time.
It better be. And we are going to say goodnight from Beyond the Thread, Context, Conversation, and Context. Thank you so much for joining us. There will be more to come. Love you all.
Bye-bye.
Okay, now how do I do this? Wait a minute.
Oh, God.
Please.
Hold on. Wait. He got off. He just left. Do you see how he just left? See how he
Joe? And so do I, because I'm hungry.
got right off. He just said,
I got salmon to put in the oven.
Baby, he said thank you and good night. And I'm sitting here trying to figure out, I don't even know how to stop the.
I think you have to hit end meeting.
Oh, I can stop live stream, right? Now, if I stop the live stream, do all the comments still there so that I can go back and post the things I said I was going to post?
I think the live will still be there, and also, I don't know if we talked about it before, but you can save these Zooms.
Are y'all still here?
I'll save it. I'll save it and keep it up there. I'll save. So everybody, I'll save this and make sure that it's still up here.
Wait, guys, I forgot to do something. I came back for something.
Oh, I forgot to record this.
Oh my God.
But it doesn't matter because it's on live.
Your live. You can keep this up on your live indefinitely.
And just press save. And I just want to say to everybody, I want to thank my husband, Johan Nigel Thomas. This actually, getting this done has been one day just off out of nowhere was like, Jamal needs to do a live. I'm gonna set it up. He made the flyer, he made the commercial, and he also was mad at Darrell and Jamal because they weren't adhering to deadlines.
Oh, we were the same day. We were not fast. We were not looking at our phones quickly enough. We weren't. I mean,
Listen,
we clearly weren't. And I was like, didn't he just send this an hour ago?
I was boiled down.
Get you somebody that will tell you to hurry up.
Wait, are we still on live? Because what is people saying?
But I wanted to give a shout out to everybody.
It's so black. I love it.
Johan Nigel Thomas is the person that gave us the lighting. He gave me the flyer. He put it all together. He got our pictures.
Yeah,
and he did the commercial all today. So I just wanted to give him a shout out and more to come.
Yes. Darius, I want to say, is in the other room, and he's been texting me the questions. Although I've been pretty good this time about getting the questions myself. At least I know that that's something that we can do. But we have a lot of support, y'all. We do. We have a lot of support, and so Brian is absolutely right. I'm assuming that if I stop the live stream, it is saved on the Facebook, right, Darrell?
Yes.
Okay. All right. That's all.
Stop the live. It'll save that on Facebook.
On Facebook. Okay.
So stop it now.
Stop live. Stop it